Hello, everybody. My name is Eric D. Johnson, also known as BrightShine around here in the city of Memphis and the county, Sheriff State, Tennessee. Today's date is Sunday morning, October the 20th, 2023. The time is 10:20 a.m. First, I'm going to say thank you to my family, my support for you, continue to support, continue to keep myself employed in Memphis, tri-state area, continue to further my education, moral conduct line, continue to pursue my social media, stuff, being administrative contract, and mark. Present time, take a break, going to school in the very near future. I'm going to go back to moral conduct line, continue to pursue my social media, stuff, being administrative contract, and mark. Now what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to start my Facebook Live. Hello, everybody. My name is Eric D. Johnson, also known as BrightShine around here in the city of Memphis and the county, Sheriff State, Tennessee. Today's date is early Sunday morning, October the 20th, 2023. The time 10:21 a.m. First, I'm gonna say thank you to my family, my support for your continued courage support. Continue to keep myself employed in the Memphis tri-state area. Continue to further my education, more college online. Continue to pursue my social degree, studying, being administrative, concentrating market, parent time, took a break, going to school in the very near future. I'm gonna go back to more college online. Continue to pursue my social degree, studying, being administrative, concentrating market. Now, what you see in front of you, anti-gang, anti-Nazi, anti-Haze. Also, St. Irenaeus, the Bishop of Lyon, together with St. Ignatius, the Bishop of Antioch. They wrote a 5-volume book titled Adverse Heresy, translated meaning against heresy. They refuted Gnosticism, proving that Gnosticism was a heresy. Also, St. Athanasius, the Bishop of Alexandria, in his 39th festal letter, Easter letter, banned all non-Christian writing. St. Athanasius, Bishop of Alexandria, together with all the other bishops in the Catholic Church, and went around and collected all that Gnostic theologian writing. Destroyed it. Some of that Gnostic theologian writing wasn't destroyed. A person took some of that Gnostic theologian writing, wrapped it in some papyrus paper, and put it in a jar and buried it in Nagmar, Egypt. In 1945, a little farm boy over in Nagmar, Egypt was outside playing and found a jar that Gnostic theologian writing was put in. He gave what he found to his father, and his father eventually gave what his son had found to the scholars in academia at the colleges and universities around the world. The sorority and fraternity at the colleges and universities have been using and misusing the Nagmar library to be self-destructive and destructive. They victimize innocent men, women, and children. They destroy nature, wildlife, and the environment. They destroy the North and South Pole. Now they're going out in space. Also, St. Epiphanius of Salome, the Bishop of Cyprus, wrote a 3-volume book titled Panorama, Greek, Panorama, Latin, translated means bread basket. Scholars have also said that St. Epiphanius of Salome, Bishop of Cyprus, 3-volume book is also Adverse Heresy, against heresies. Esoteric and exoteric. esoteric and exoteric. Esoteric. And you break it down to syllables. S-O-ter-ic. Esoteric. And you break it down to syllables. S-O-ter-ic. Exoteric. And you break it down to syllables. X-O-ter-ic. Exoteric. And you break it down to syllables. X-O-ter-ic. Rejecting knowledge. Western esotericism. Esoteric. Western mystery tradition. Hermetism. Gnosticism. Neoplatonism. Rosicrucianism. Freemasonry. The Age of Enlightenment. Spiritualism. Kabbalah. The occult. Exoteric. Rejecting knowledge. Western esotericism. Esotericism. Western mystery tradition. Hermetism. Gnosticism. Neoplatonism. Rosicrucianism. Freemasonry. The Age of Enlightenment. Spiritualism. Kabbalah. The occult. Exoteric. Rejecting knowledge. Occultism. Say arcane. Esoteric. Spiritualism. Theosophy. Anthroposophy. Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. New Age. But you have occult sciences and occult qualities. And don't forget our culture. Rejecting knowledge. Occultism. Arcane. Esoteric. Spiritualism. Theosophy. Anthroposophy. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. New Age. You have occult sciences. You have occult qualities, a culture. It's rejecting knowledge. The Almighty Vice Lord, Four Corner Hustle. The Almighty Black Prince Stone. The Almighty Black Disciple, Poppin'. The Almighty Mickey Cole, Crackin'. The Almighty Bluefin, Black Disciple. The Black Disciple, the Lord, Stone, Disciple, 7-Eleven, G Killer, Gangster Disciple Killer, Glazed Donut Killer. Always remember the important thing. What you teach and how you teach. I'm not on today's video. I'm not gonna do my reading like I usually do. I like doing my reading. I like doing my Bible reading, and I like reading that verses of races, against heresy. I like reading some of the information from the church fathers, the early church fathers, like for instance, Justin Martyr, Saint Ignatius, the Bishop of Antioch, and many other church fathers. And so, as well as Saint Epiphanius of Salome, the Panarian and Panarium. I like reading it, and like I said today, doing my video, I'm not gonna do my reading, but I like to do my reading as well as on the Apocrypha, the books and things of this nature. For instance, Sirach, I like reading. And so, but like I said, I want to say that today, I won't be doing my reading. Now, what I'm looking at, I was looking at the number of times that the nation of Israel has gotten into wars and what it led up to today. Some of the recent conflicts. It's even being reported in the news that, the number of times that Israel, the Israeli government, has gotten into military wars and some of the things that happen. Now, when it comes to Lebanon, South Lebanon, the conflict, when you think about the nation of Lebanon. Because of the United Nations, Lebanon is really not at war right now. But you have to remember that Lebanon is divided between Christian and Muslim. And so, most of the other, in Lebanon, in the south of Lebanon, southern Lebanon, you have Muslim. Most likely, the people that are considered to be Muslim in the south are mostly in Islam. In the Islamic religion, you have fundamentalists and what they refer to as moderates. Most of your moderate Muslims are supported by Saudi Arabia. Then you have your fundamentalists that are mostly supported by Iran. And when you say moderate Muslim, mostly that means like Sunni Muslim. And then you have your fundamentalist Muslim, referred to as like Shiite Muslims. And most of the Shiite Muslims are the ones that you hear about in the news, like Hezbollah in South Lebanon, supported by Iran. And also now you're hearing about this Hamas organization. It's a terrorist organization. It's not the government. It's a terrorist organization, a Palestinian terrorist organization, supported by Iran. So when you're being supported by Iran, that means you're Shiite, because they're not being supported by Saudi Arabia. They're not being supported by Saudi Arabia, or they're not being classified as being a Sunni Muslim terrorist organization. Now, let me refer back to Al Qaeda, another terrorist organization. Iran didn't support that. Iran did not support the Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda, most of the people who were Al Qaeda came out of Saudi Arabia. For example, Osama bin Laden. He was a Saudi Arabian national. He was from Saudi Arabia. He was not a Shiite. He was a Sunni Muslim. A lot of the Sunni Muslims were Al Qaeda. In Syria, Jordan, whoever these people were that who was identified as Al Qaeda. Not saying that the Saudi Arabian government supported this, is what they were saying. The people who was terrorists came from Saudi Arabia. Not the Saudi Arabian government, the prince, the kingdom and all that. But Osama bin Laden was a Saudi Arabian national, and many other people. If I'm not mistaken, the terrorists who hijacked the planes that hit the World Trade Center, they were Saudi Arabian nationals. They was from Saudi Arabia. If I'm not mistaken. Now, if I'm mistaken, somebody, I can, of course, I got my computer here. But I'm just saying, during that period of time, the terrorist uprising, the terrorist attacks, the terrorist influence at that time was a Sunni Muslim influence, terrorist influence coming out of Saudi Arabia and the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. For example, Iraq, Saddam Hussein, he fought against Iran. The Sunnis, Muslims, coming out of Iraq, Saddam Hussein, Iraq. The first Iraq war. But this is what they always know. That on one side you had Iran. Iran is a predominantly Shiite Muslim, fundamentalist Muslim. The Iraqis, being close next door to Saudi Arabia, predominantly, not saying that it's not no Shiites, but predominantly, the predominant religious influence in Iraq at that time and even today is a Sunni Muslim dominated influence in Iraq. Now, when it comes to Syria, the same thing. You have this interpretation that either you're a Shiite or you're a Muslim when you talk about a civil war in Syria. It broke down to either you're a Sunni or you're a Shiite or you're a Christian, because you have a Christian minority in Syria. But the civil war itself in Syria can be broke down to either you're a Shiite or you're a Sunni. And at that period of time, when we talk about the Al-Qaeda influence, you had some of that influence at that time that was in that part of the world. And the United States government, you remember some of the drone attacks that killed many of the Al-Qaeda leadership. Many other Al-Qaeda leaders were captured and serving time and brought back to, you remember the court case. Some of the leaders of Al-Qaeda were not killed, but they were actually captured by our government and were brought back to America and was put in an American courtroom and convicted. They right now, some of the Al-Qaeda terrorists are serving time in a federal penitentiary right now from Al-Qaeda. The Al-Qaeda terrorists are serving time in a federal penitentiary right now, today. They were convicted. You remember during the terrorist war, Guantanamo Bay, many of the terrorists, our government captured many of the terrorists. And they were put in Guantanamo Bay. Many of those terrorists were brought to court and were convicted by our government. They serving time in a federal penitentiary. Some of them still down in Guantanamo Bay. Some of them still in Guantanamo Bay. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, because it's important. Our government does not tolerate terrorism. Zero tolerance for terrorism. We've been fighting against terrorism for a long time. We've been fighting, and we still fighting terrorists today. Some of our American citizens have been taken hostage in Israel and being held by a terrorist group called Hamas. Some of the victims, some of the American victims have been killed. Some of the people who were American citizens, they're not hostages. They were killed by Hamas, the terrorist group. And so again, the number of times that the Israeli Defense Force, the Israeli government, has fought wars against the Shiite and the Sunni Muslims. Now let me say this again about Lebanon. The Israeli Defense Force in the South Lebanon conflict, 1985 to 2000. It was a 15-year warfare. And the Lebanese Christian fought on the side of the Israeli Defense Force against the Lebanese Muslim guerrillas for 15 years. 15 long years fought against the Lebanese Muslim guerrillas with the Lebanese Christians. So that means that Lebanon is divided between Christian and Muslim. They fought a war before, they'll fight again. But because of the United Nations, they try to break that thing up, try to get in between, and try to bring some kind of ceasefire to try to break it up. There was another Lebanon war in 2006. But it wasn't, the Christians didn't necessarily get involved. But this was in the summer of 2006. Two Israeli reserve soldiers had been kidnapped, had been abducted. And saying that the Hezbollah, the Muslims, fought against the Israeli military. And it started on July 12, 2006 and continued until the United Nations brokered a ceasefire. The United Nations brokered a ceasefire. And the ceasefire went into effect on 14 August 2006. Now, when it comes to this Gaza operation, the Israelis have fought about this Gaza recently. Now, we're not years back. Let me refer back. And that's what I was just referring back. So when it comes to this Gaza, we're going all the way back to 2009. And this whole thing about all these Arab nations and all this and what they call Gaza and the Palestinians. This was in 2009, Operation Cast Lead. Then there was another operation, 2012, the Israeli operation in the Gaza Strip, or Operation Pillar of Defense. Then 2014, Gaza War, Operation Protective Edge. In the Gaza Strip. And then in 2014, see this, there was a military offensive on the Gaza Strip as a response to the collapse of American-sponsored peace talk attempts by rival Palestinian factions to form a coalition government, the kidnapping and murder of 3 Israeli teenagers. The subsequent kidnapping and murder of a Palestinian teenager and increased rocket attacks on Israel by Hamas militants. And then there was the subsequent kidnapping and murder of a Palestinian teenager and increased rocket attacks on Israel by Hamas militants. And then you had the Syrian civil war and the Iran-Israel conflict during the Syrian civil war. Then in 2021, Israel and Palestine crisis or Operation Guardian of the Walls. That was in 2021. There were riots between Jews and Arabs in Israeli cities. Hamas in Gaza sent military rockets into Israel, and Iron Dome intercepted most dangerous rockets. Israel attacked targets in Gaza. Now, in that Yom Kippur War, you had a lot of Arab nations fighting against Israel. Now, the Arab invasion was repelled, and then it was a United Nations ceasefire. Egypt and Israel peace treaty, agreement on disengagement. So that was the 1973 Yom Kippur War. (1978) Operation Litany. Then the first Lebanon War, 19. So like I said, the Israeli Defense Force, they've been defending Israel against a lot of these attacks, things of this nature. And so, like I said, between let me see, 2000. We had the first Intifada, and then the second Intifada, and this we getting in the 2000s. 2006 Lebanon War, Gaza War, and so there's been a lot of Israeli Defense Force fighting against this militant Muslim militants who are really not part of the Palestinian government, but some outside who being influenced by like Iran. If not Iran, then you have these other outside influences who try to use the Palestinians for their objectives. The United States government has tried to negotiate for peace. The United Nations is always involved in this part of the world, trying to work for peace and for the Palestinian people and for the Israeli people, as well as all people can sit down and talk to one another about things breaking down to all-out war. And so it's important that people have a voice. Everybody, like I said, when you talk about the United Nations is everybody on this planet, on this earth. Every human being has a voice at the United Nations. The United States government is not a silent member of the United Nations. The United States with Russia and China and the United Kingdom, France, what they call the Security Council. Many other people on the Security Council are nuclear powers. And so, and then you have all these other bodies in the United Nations. But every human being on this planet, on this earth, is represented at the United Nations. And every human being has a voice at the United Nations. Things don't have to break down into all-out conflict, all-out war. See, we all, let's say this. Let's all say this about the United Nations. When the United Nations, when the League of Nations was considered, it was considered to represent all people. Because you know when the League of Nations was started, you had all these colonial powers who were the influence over other people on this planet, on this earth. But when they said this about the League of Nations, it's not that the League of Nations was a dumb idea. It was some things they had to work out. So what they did, what the founders of the League of Nations did, they just discontinued the League of Nations and started the United Nations. It still was the same concept. Peace for all people. Peace for all people on this earth, on this planet. The United Nations. Peace for all human beings. And when you say all the people, when you say the United Nations, understand this. We all have ancestors. See, this is what we're going to get to. We're going to spend a little time, not too much, but we're going to say this about all human beings on this earth, on this planet. We all have ancestors. Every human being on this earth, on this planet, we all have ancestors. We all do. And you want to bring up all the issues about my ancestors and your ancestors that we still having issues about today. We want to talk about the right and the wrong about my ancestors and your ancestors. That's what the United Nations had to deal with. My ancestors and your ancestors. And about the right and the wrong that my ancestors and your ancestors allegedly done or did. Because see, you couldn't have never thought about the League of Nations and think about how all these people be accusing each other's ancestors of doing this and doing that. Or not doing this or not doing that. It could have never been no League of Nations. But in the founding of the League of Nations, it was always understood that we all have ancestors. We all do. Every human being on this earth, on this planet, has ancestors. And we can sit around all day and night and talk about my ancestors, and you can talk about your ancestors. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So in the founding of the League of Nations, it's not that they swept it under the rug or disregarded or ignored my ancestors and your ancestors. They were considering. They knew. But when you look at the world, it ain't nowhere in the world you can overlook or you can ignore my ancestors and your ancestors. All that colonialism, it ain't no way. When you see America, it ain't nowhere in the world you can ignore my ancestors and your ancestors. It ain't no way. Because during that period of time, the world colonialism was the biggest influence. And the next biggest influence was this coming wave of communism, socialism, Marxism. It hadn't really just hit, but it was coming. It was beginning to be a big influence. Socialism, communism, Marxism. It was becoming a problem. It was becoming a big influence. So at that time of the founding of the League of Nations, it's not that my ancestors or your ancestors were being overlooked in all the issues involved. No, that was the reason why. Because people keep talking about my ancestors and your ancestors yesterday. But today, see, this is what it was. At the time of the founding of the League of Nations, today, you can't have a normal conversation because you keep talking about yesterday. About my ancestors and your ancestors yesterday. We can't solve any problem because the whole conversation is surrounded about my ancestors and your ancestors yesterday. See, so when it comes to the League of Nations, it wasn't wrong. Some of the issues were involved we're dealing with today. Because we addressed yesterday, we founded the League of Nations to deal with yesterday. So in order for us to deal with today, we had to end the League of Nations. And now we have the United Nations. So we can talk about today. That's the reason why the United Nations is being successful today and tomorrow. Because we dealt with yesterday with the League of Nations. See, we don't have this breakdown anymore with people all over the world talking about my ancestors and your ancestors yesterday. Not that it's insignificant. We still talk about my ancestors and your ancestors yesterday. We still do that. We still do that. But we have a form. We don't have to break down into warfare. Going all the way back 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 generations back. Trying to remember. See, that was the founding of the League of Nations. So people today can still talk about their ancestors and their contributions for them today. We all have ancestors. And so we all pride ourselves of being whoever we call ourselves. And so it's many of people of European heritage. People in Hungary. People in Turkey. People in Italy. People in Romania. People in Russia. People in Finland. Sweden. Norway. Iceland. People in Belgium. They can talk about where they came from. Who their ancestors are. People in the United Kingdom. They can remember back all the way. They making movies about Alexander. Excuse me, not Alexander, but Arthur. Excuse me. I'm not talking about over in Greece, but what I meant was Arthur, King Arthur. They making movies about King Arthur. The legend about King Arthur. We're not finna break down is it true or not. But they still talking about King Arthur. The people in the United Kingdom. And some of them people in the United Kingdom, they live here in America. Then you go to the Middle East, just like we talking about the Jews. The people of what we refer to as the Jewish faith. People, Europeans, people, Africans, even some people in East Asia have a history of being Jewish. People can talk about being Jewish. They can talk about their Jewish heritage. You have people of Afro-Asiatic heritage before Islam. Before Islam. People who are Afro-Asiatic. Eritreans, Ethiopians, Somalians. People in Egypt. People in Syria, Lebanon. People, the Palestinian people. People in Morocco, Algeria, Libya, Tunisia. You name all these countries. Mauritania. People are Afro-Asiatic. And they can talk about their ancestors. They can talk about their heritage. And they can remember their ancestors as far back as they can go. Their traditions, including Islamic tradition. You have people in Sudan, in South Sudan today. It ain't always been a South Sudan like as a government. It's always been a Sudan in that area, but it was under colonialism for a period of time. Then they got independence, and then there was war because you have people in the north who are Afro-Asiatic. Then you have the people who are not, in that like southern part of Lebanon, of Sudan, who are Nilo-Saharan. And you have some Niger Congo also in southern Sudan. In its conflict, it's been the north versus the south. And then you have, once the southern Sudan became a government, it broke out again into war. Factions. Nilo-Saharans fighting against Nilo-Saharans, killing each other. You have wars being fought, the Niger Congo people, including me. You got Niger Congo people all over the world because of colonialism. We can talk about our ancestors. We can talk about all the right and the wrong. See, this is what the League of Nations did about the right and the wrong, about my ancestors and your ancestors, and the right and the wrong. See, there was a period you couldn't get nobody to come to the table and talk because there was so much anger. But today, we can talk about my ancestors. We can talk about your ancestors. We can bring up all the right and the wrong about my ancestors and your ancestors. We have the United Nations to address all these issues. See, it's important that we have the United Nations because it's all this right and wrong about our ancestors. It's a lot of people who bring up these issues. When you talk about Israel and Palestine, you want to bring up all the right and the wrong. You can do that. We have a United Nations. It's not like it's being overlooked. You can talk about what happened in the past. Bring it up. Because it's going to lead all the way up to today. You can agree or disagree with what other people did in the past. You ain't got to like it, or you can like it or dislike it. We have a United Nations today. See, when you talk about Israel and Palestine, don't forget the League of Nations. At the same period of time, World War I, World War II. By the time World War II, it was the United Nations. So all these things about yesterday, see, at the League of Nations, when you talk about yesterday, what people did that people don't agree with or people agree with, the League of Nations at that time, they addressed it. And they formed the League of Nations. You can't form no League of Nations and not even have any idea about how people feel about what happened yesterday. So we have a United Nations today for tomorrow. So when you look at Israel, you see Palestine, it's not like we don't already know how it all started. We already know. Take my word for it. You can't say we don't know how Israel became Israel today. You can't say we don't know why Palestine is. We do know. We do know. I hear people talking about it. and you out protesting on the streets as if people don't know the history of that region of the world. We do know. We know how it all started. It's that same for a lot of people all over the world about what people did yesterday. That's the reason why you see all these African Americans, these black people living in America. And in the Caribbean, in Canada, in Central America, South America, in Europe, in Asia. Because yesterday, and so you see people over in East Asia intermixing with people from Africa. See, yesterday, people from East Asia intermarrying, intermixing with people from Niger Congo. The U.S. military stationed in Japan, South Korea, was in the Philippines. I know because I've been undischarged veteran of the United States Marine Corps. I've been to the Philippines, been to South Korea, been to Japan. See, yesterday, now look at what we have today. So it's not like you can't. It's that way for a lot of people all over the world. Yesterday, that's the reason why we have the United Nations today. So tomorrow, all human beings can live. All human beings can live. We all can live. We know yesterday. We know. Yesterday, I know. We have a United Nations today for all human beings. All human beings can breathe, can live in peace. We can all live in peace. We don't have to keep fighting over land. We don't have to keep fighting over land. We don't have to keep shedding blood over land. Because yesterday, my ancestors and your ancestors we live in a world today where everybody got all kind of weapons. And it ain't gonna never really just solve anything. All it's gonna be is just killing on this side and this side. We still have major conflicts all over the world, not just in Israel, not just in Gaza, not just in the West Bank, not just in that part of the world. The continent of Africa, it's still wars being fought. I'm talking about all out war still being fought. People trying to get land, trying to have some kind of territory. So they can exist. It's important to understand that it's important that I say the things I'm saying to get to the root of the issue that we had many, many years ago and then you hear people talking. And when I hear people talking, this is my response to the things that I hear people say about Israel and the Palestinian people. You talk like as if people don't know history. You talk like we don't have any idea about history and what you're trying to bring up. You can bring it up. Like I told you, the League of Nations, colonialism. When you talk about Palestine, Palestine was a British protectorate at that time. It wasn't anything like a Israeli government at that time. Yeah, I know history. Damn it, I got Wikipedia right here. You want me to look it up? You want me to look up Palestine? Okay, look it up. Let's go to Wikipedia. Palestine. The Levant. Okay, Palestine. Let me read this right here. After World War II, in 1947, the United Nations adopted a partition plan for mandatory Palestine, which recommended the creation of independent Arab and Jewish states and an internationalized Jerusalem. The partition plan was accepted by the Jews but rejected by the Arabs. Immediately after the United Nations General Assembly adopted the plan as Resolution 181, a civil war broke out in Palestine and the plan was not implemented. The day after the establishment of the State of Israel, on 14 May 1948, neighboring Arab countries invaded the former British mandate and engaged Israeli forces in the first Arab-Israeli war. Later, the All-Palestine government was established by the Arab League. On 22nd September 1948, to govern the All-Palestine Protectorate in the Egyptian-occupied Gaza Strip. It was soon recognized by all Arab League members except Transjordan, which had occupied and later annexed the West Bank, and including East Jerusalem. Palestine is currently recognized by 138 of the 193 United Nations member states, though jurisdiction of the All-Palestine government was declared to cover the whole of the former mandatory Palestine. Its effective jurisdiction was limited to the Gaza Strip. Israel later captured the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria during the Six-Day War in June 1967. So, when I hear people talking, you talk like people don't know history. Damn it, I hear history. I'm looking at Wikipedia. So if I need a history lesson, goddammit, I can look at Wikipedia. The way you be talking. But we we live in a world where we have freedom of speech, and you can speak, you can talk. That's the reason why we have a United Nations. We just read it. You want to sit around and argue about some land, the Golan Heights? You want to sit around and argue about the Gaza Strip? Because that's what it's going to boil down to. You arguing about this piece of land that your ancestors claim that your ancestors, and as you just read about Israel being formed. And so you want to argue with everybody about Israel. You don't want to recognize Israel. See, this is the reason why the League of Nations had thought about all these people that you call Arab and the claims that you be making about land. And religion. See, everybody is aware, is informed about history. That's the reason why we had a League of Nations. Because at the forming of the League of Nations, they already knew that any and everybody was talking about their ancestors. How you think World War II got started? Somebody named Adolf Hitler. And the Germans, you know what they was talking about? They were talking about their damn ancestors. Was blonde hair and blue-eyed, and that they were superior. That's how World War II got started. They were talking about their damn ancestors. And again, let me just read one more thing on history. 1947, the United Nations adopted a partition plan for a two-state solution in the remaining territory of the Mandate. The plan was accepted by the Jewish leadership but rejected by the Arab leaders. And Britain refused to implement the plan. On the eve of final British withdrawal, the Jewish Agency for Israel Now, the Jewish Agency for Israel, formerly known as the Jewish Agency for Palestine, is the largest Jewish non-profit organization in the world. It was established in 1929 as the operative branch of the World Zionist Organization, headed by David Ben-Gurion. Declared the establishment of the State of Israel according to the proposed United Nations plan. The Arab High Committee did not declare a state of its own, and instead, together with Transjordan, Egypt, and the other members of the Arab League of the time, commenced military action resulting in the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. During the war, Israel gained additional territory that was designated to be part of the Arab state under the United Nations plan. Egypt occupied the Gaza Strip, and Transjordan occupied and then annexed the West Bank. Egypt initially supported the creation of an all-Palestine government, but disbanded it in 1959. Transjordan never recognized it and instead decided to incorporate the West Bank. With its own territory to form Jordan. The annexation was ratified in 1950 but rejected by the international community. The Six-Day War in 1967, when Israel fought against Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, ended with Israel occupying the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, besides other territories. So when I hear people talking, see, like I said again, there was a time with all this colonialism from these Europeans, from West Europeans, mainly the United Kingdom, France. They was the biggest. Then you had Belgium. But the biggest colonial governments was the United Kingdom and France. They were the biggest ones. Then you had some of this German colonialism, like I said, Belgium. Italy. I think they had Ethiopia was under their colonial rule for a period of time. But mostly, then of course, we know Spain, their colonial all over Mexico, all down Central and South America, the Caribbean, Spain, and Portugal. We know that. See, for a long time, it's been colonialism. So when you hear people talking today about Israel and Palestine, colonialism was a lot of people in these parts of the world was up under colonial rule, including the Ottomans, including Turkey, the Ottomans. Because like I just read, when they talk about Ben-Gurion, David Ben-Gurion, he was from Poland. But then he moved to what was, in 1900. But see, he moved to Palestine in the early 1900s. And in the early 1900s, that part of the world was up under Ottoman rule. See, it's been a lot of colonialism. So when you talk about your ancestors yesterday, when they formed the League of Nations, all this was in consideration about all human beings' ancestors and about right and wrong yesterday. And about all this land that we fighting about today. And could and possibly gonna still be fighting about tomorrow. Because our ancestors yesterday. See, when I hear people talk today, and you all emotional, Like you so upset. Hell, the United Nations was trying to do what was right. So everybody can live. It was the United Nations that recommended a two-state solution. Palestine and Israel. It was the United Nations. It's not like the Israeli ancestors and the Arab ancestors have been overlooked. But all those issues about colonialism, and you can talk about Islam and Christianity, you can talk about Judaism, Buddhism, and Hinduism, and all the other, whatever else you want to talk about, you can bring it up. All that was in consideration. A two-state solution. Palestine and Israel. There's a two-state solution. See? So today, talking about some land, the things that's being done today, it's wrong what this terrorist group done. The United States government, as a government, does not tolerate terrorism. Does not tolerate terrorism. Zero tolerance for terrorism. Period. It don't make no difference. Who, what, where, when, why, how. It don't matter. In any shape, form, or fashion, directly or indirect, the United States government does not tolerate terrorism. Period. And what this so-called Hamas, Hezbollah, or Al-Qaeda, or Islamic Jihad, or ISIS, whoever, no matter who these terrorists are, wherever they are in the world, wherever they are, whoever they are, the United States government does not tolerate terrorism, period, in any shape, form, or fashion, directly or indirectly, period. Excuse me. When I hear people talking, you have the right to, free speech. It's your right. People talk all the time. People debate all the time. Every reason why we have a Democratic Party and a Republican Party. They have a big disagreement or agree or disagree. Sometimes even in a party you have, disagreements in the same party. The Democrats sometimes don't agree with each other. They have disagreement. Sometimes the Republicans have disagreement with each other. When it comes to terrorism, the Democrats and Republicans, they come together and they say this: the United States government, our government, federal, state, local, the United States as a nation does not tolerate terrorism, period. Whether it be domestic, foreign, any shape, form, or fashion, direct or indirect. Look, stop making up all these excuses and all these reasons. It's no excuse, no reason for terrorism. Period. And that's the right policy to have. It's the right thing to do. When it comes to the Israeli nation, the Israeli government, they've been fighting against other governments and nations and fighting against terrorism. And it's right for our government to stand side by side with the Israeli government, as well as the Palestinian government. Because this Hamas terrorist group, they are not the Palestinian government. They some criminals. That's what they are. They the criminals. They do not represent the Palestinian government. They are criminals. Because they're what terrorists are. They're criminals. The United States government is doing what's right. Stand side by side with Israel. Now humanitarian aid is being brought into the Gaza Strip. What sense that make that it had to be anything like that in the first place? If you had to do what was right, it wouldn't have been no need for no humanitarian aid. But because you didn't give a damn, you didn't care, you was not concerned about the Palestinian people. See, this is what Hamas, you don't fool nobody. You're a bunch of criminals. You're not trying to do anything that's right for the Palestinian people. You're just a damn criminal. Trying to steal, trying to rob from the Palestinian people. The Israeli government is doing what's right to stand for their nation, defend Israel. Israel has a right to exist. They don't have to ask nobody's permission to exist. The United Nations already knew what the history was of that area of the world. They already knew. Just like the Palestinian people. The United Nations already know the history of that region of the world. It's a two-state solution. Palestine has a right to exist. Israel has a right to exist. It's a United Nations solution for both Palestine and Israel to exist. It's been reported that some of the Israeli Defense Force have already been engaging with, militarily engaging, not the full Israeli defense. Some of the Israeli Defense Forces are already in combat with Hamas, with Hezbollah. There's been Hezbollah firing munitions across the border into Israel. Hamas is being reported in the news. Hamas is still firing rockets, as well as guerrilla warfare on the land. The Israeli Defense Force have not sent their ground force in, but some of their ground forces are having combat, getting into firefights with Hamas. The Israeli Air Force is continuing to carry out airstrikes against Hamas. That's the right thing to do. They trying to hide in these bunkers and these tunnels underground. They trying to hide. Hostages are still being held by Hamas. There's no reason for any human being to be a hostage. No reason for any human being to be held hostage. The Israeli Defense Force in their operations, the Israeli Defense Force in their operations have captured, it's been reported, they have captured some of the Hamas militants. And they are being interrogated. And when they interrogated them, it's being reported that the so-called Hamas commanders had ordered their soldiers to attack men, women, and children. You don't have that right. I want to remind the people of when the United States was fighting and still fighting against terrorism. I do remember there was a warrant. The Department of Justice, the FBI. I do remember that some of those Al-Qaeda operatives, some of those Al-Qaeda terrorists, they were wanted. They were wanted. They had a warrant out for their arrest, either dead or alive. Some of them died. Some of them were killed by drone attacks. But some of them had an arrest warrant. And our government went after them and brought them back to face justice in a courtroom. They're in the federal penitentiary right now. And they did the same thing. Under interrogation, they started talking. They started talking. They didn't get out of it. They're going to spend the rest of their life in the penitentiary. Just like one of them, I think was the Egyptian cleric, the blind Egyptian cleric, is sitting in the federal penitentiary right now. Sitting in the federal penitentiary right now. He's not the only one. It's a lot of them. Some of them still down in Guantanamo Bay. Some of them who was in Guantanamo Bay, they got released and got sent back. They didn't come to America. They got sent back wherever they came from. See, this is what the United States government did about terrorism. The Department of Justice issued an arrest warrant, and our government went after them. And again, some of those terrorists got killed by the United States government. They got killed. So the Israeli Defense Force do what's right. I know right now there's a lot of talk about civilians. Okay. But first of all, it wasn't anything that the Israelis or the United States government or anybody else was doing to the Palestinian civilians. It's what Hamas has been doing and is doing to hurt the Palestinian civilians. See, you try to use violence to recruit. You try to use violence to recruit. And see, again, this is part of the plan. This is part of Hamas' plan. When they carried out this recent terrorist attack, in the plan, they didn't care or wasn't concerned about the Palestinian people. Because they knew, as I just said, when you look up the history of the wars that have been fought, they already knew ahead of time that if we do this, we know the Israelis gonna respond militarily. We know that if we kill men, women, and children, the Israeli Defense Force is gonna attack. We know this. That's what we want them to do. Because in Palestine, the Palestinians are saying this is exactly what they want to do, to recruit. And then also being reported some other group, Islamic Jihad. It's been a recent incident that made news, saying that a rocket had been fired and it hit a hospital. Hamas and Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, and all the rest of them, they want to be on television. So they go out in the streets and protest, claiming that Israel had attacked a hospital. As of today, it's being reported that the rocket that they're talking about that hit the hospital, it wasn't Israel. Israeli intelligence had already intercepted message that had been sent by Islamic Jihad. It was a misfire from one of their rockets. And it fell in a hospital parking lot. Now, specialists in explosive from around the world are starting to investigate. And they already saying it wasn't Israel. It wasn't Israel. It was Hamas. It was Islamic Jihad. But it wasn't Israel. The Israeli Defense Force, they on the right side, fighting against terrorism. And that's what our government should continue to do. Be on the right side, fighting against terrorism. We should spend a whole lot of more time talking about the civilians. Once we get the humanitarian aid in there, it's time to start dealing with these terrorists. It's time to start dealing with these damn terrorists. We don't have to spend no more time talking about civilians. Because it wasn't nothing that the United States government or the Israeli government was doing to hurt civilians. So we don't have to spend too much more damn time talking about don't hurt the civilians. We wasn't hurting the civilians. See, that's the reason why I wanted to talk today. Because I've been hearing people talking. You have the right to freedom of speech. And that's not just a United States concept or, law that you have the freedom of speech. But at the United Nations, a lot of the freedoms that we talk about, that's what they talk about at the United Nations, about people being free. So you have the right to freedom of speech. You have, whether people agree or not. You have the right to freedom of speech. You have the right to protest about whatever. People have the right to protest. I mean, if you want to be on television, you can protest, march in Jordan, Turkey. People marching all around different places. But it's one thing I'm going to say. First of all, it was nothing that the United States was doing to hurt no civilian. And it wasn't anything that the Israeli government was doing to hurt civilians. So I don't know what you mean. But again, I'm going to say this again. It was nothing that the Israeli government was doing to hurt Palestinian people. And it wasn't anything that the United States government was doing to hurt Palestinian people. It's what Hamas did that's wrong. It's what Hezbollah did that's wrong. The Israeli government has a right to defend themselves. They have a right to exist. The United Nations. Two-state solution. Palestine and Israel. They don't have to ask your permission. They don't need nobody's permission nowhere on this planet. The United Nations has already made that choice and made that decision. Israel has a right to exist. Palestine has a right to exist. They don't need your permission. Israel don't have to ask Palestine to exist. Palestine don't have to ask Israel permission to exist. The United Nations made that choice and made that decision. A two-state solution. Israel has a right to defend themselves. We do not have to spend any more time talking about civilians. It's time for Israel and it's time for the United States to address this problem. Hamas got to be destroyed. Hamas must be destroyed. As well as Hezbollah. You're not going to do that. You're not going to take it. We done showed people around the world that the United States does not tolerate terrorism. Period. Fighting against terrorism. Think about men and women serving in the armed forces of the United States of America. There are many servicemen and women who sacrifice their lives. Fighting against terrorism. I think about the World Trade Center. The attack on the World Trade Center. The first responders. They sacrificed their own lives fighting against terrorism. Men and women serving in the United States Armed Forces fighting against terrorism got injured, severely injured, badly injured, fighting against terrorism. They made a movie. I can just think about one movie. Black Hawk Down. Over in Somalia. Fighting against terrorism. Then there been some more movies they make in that part of in all over the Middle East, fighting against terrorism. Sometimes you can go back and watch a YouTube video. I can think about the United States Marine fighting in Fallujah on rooftops, fighting against terrorism. I can think about all the aircraft carriers going around doing sorties day and night, fighting against terrorism. Think about the United States Army, all those IEDs that the Iranians were making, Humvees being blown up, rolling over IEDs, improvised explosive devices. A lot of our servicemen and women got hurt real bad. Fighting against terrorism. I think about the United States Air Force doing the same thing that the United States Navy, flying sorties day and night, dropping bombs, bunker busters on the terrorists. They talk about Afghanistan, the pullout. This is such a great country, fighting against terrorism. And look at all the people from Afghanistan. They got the opportunity to come to this country, to be an American. This is a great country. And I know that our nation gonna do the right thing. We're gonna stand with Israel and fight against terrorism. Now I'm gonna go ahead and end today's video. But I want, talk because I be hearing things, and when people talk, I had to respond. I just had to. I had to respond. America is going to do the right thing. It's the right thing to be considerate of civilian populations in a wartime situation because they are innocent. The civilians are innocent. And we have to be considerate of civilians. We've been considered of civilians. Let me remind people who keep talking about the civilians, damn it, we was already being considerate of the civilians. We wasn't doing anything to hurt anybody. And neither was Israel. The people in Israel at the time of this recent terrorist attack, they was at a music festival. They weren't doing anything to hurt the Palestinian people. So whoever is talking about the civilian, the people in Israel was at a music festival. They was not doing anything to hurt Palestinian civilians. I know our nation is going to do the right thing. They're going to stand with Israel and fight against terrorism. Again, my name is Eric D. Johnson, also known by BrightShine, right here in the city of Memphis, in the county of Shevins, in the state of Tennessee. Thank all my fans, my support for your continued current support. I always put God first. Our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the Son of God, bled and died on the cross for our sins. And take care of yourself. And until next time, I wish each and every one of you the very best. And continue to pray for peace. It can be achieved. Peace can be achieved. You take care of yourself. Wish each and every one the very best.